This is The Medical Show with Scott Johnson and Dr. Jerry Tolbert.
Hello, and welcome to The Medical Show. My name is Scott Johnson. That's Dr. Jerry Tolbert. Hello.
Greetings.
Welcome to episode 6, Jerry. How you feeling about this?
Excited, but also a little sad. We made it through the whole season, but this is the last episode for the season.
Well, I managed to put it off a couple of weeks, arbitrarily.
We keep fearing the end, so we keep pushing it out so we don't have to end it.
That's right. We don't want it to end, but don't worry. I think we got lots of plans for the future. But for now, we're going to bring you one big banger of an episode to finish our initial 6-episode season commitment. And we're going to do it with a topic that I think is impossible for anyone listening to not have some experience with. And that is online information about your healthcare. Searching Google because something hurts. Does this look infected? Hold it up to your phone and then an app tells you whether it does or not. These sorts of things. That one might be a little extreme, but there are a lot of examples of that. Yeah, this is exactly. So we're going to start, though, with a call we've been hanging on to for a while from a listener named Rishi B, old friend of the network, fantastic guy, talking about some stuff. And we'll kick it off with this.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Dr. G. This is Rishi B, recording from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Just wanted to say that I've been really enjoying the podcast. Well, the first episode, really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to all the episodes in this podcast. And I just wanted to do two things. First thing, I just wanted to underline the point that you guys got to at the end of your first episode, which is just saying that despite all the problems that we have in the healthcare industry, there's actually a lot of good things happening, and they maybe not. Some of those good things maybe don't get a headline or make articles. But, doctors today are having to do even more than doctors in the past had to do. So it's good to keep that in mind, especially for myself. I work in the healthcare industry and gotten a little disillusioned from some things that I've seen. But it's good to keep that in mind that there's a lot of good happening. I just wanted to ask maybe kind of like a lighter question here. And perhaps this is anecdotal, but in my college days, med school students partied the hardest of everyone that I knew. Up to the one and only time that I've been proposed to do cocaine was from a friend who was a med school student, and I declined. Or did I? But I wonder if Dr. G would share that sentiment that med school students party the hardest of everyone. Thanks, guys. Looking forward to more.
Is that true?
Well, I don't know if it's true whether or not he got offered cocaine.
Oh, right.
I do know that there is a lot of coping going on when you are studying and working as hard as we had to. So I think that it is somewhat of an overcorrection a lot of times, and it does happen. There is a well-earned reputation of folks doing things to decompress. So a lot more alcohol. As far as the other substances, I didn't see it, but I also wasn't a big party guy. Most of my decompression was video games and hanging out with my wife, and I was on a different kind of plane at that point. But
sure.
But in terms of needing that decompression after the amount and volume of work that we're doing and the things that we're looking at and the things that we're trying to learn how to cope with and deal with and understand, on a deeper level. Absolutely. That is a well-earned reputation.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder what the others that are comparable would be. Like, I know athletes tend to have a pretty good time. I don't know what other area of study would maybe put you at these parties.
So fraternity culture in general is going to be where most of the parties are going to be.
Yeah.
And there are going to be a lot of fraternity folks that end up in professional schools. So pharmacy school, medical school, law school. Law school absolutely is notorious for partying hard.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they are almost as notorious as medical students at the places that I've been. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
Because I can't speak for schools that I didn't go to, obviously, but in general, at bigger universities that have multiple professional colleges, you're going to see those folks that have a higher stress level of completion and competitiveness. They're going to be the people that you see decompressing the hardest.
I don't know why. I just can picture lawyers throwing down. I can just see it. I don't know. It's just stereotypes or whatever it is. But yeah, it's probably TV that did that to me, like everything. It's unfortunate. Stupid TV. Whatever. It also teaches me a lot of bad things about doctors, So I guess it's all worked out in the end.
And a lot of bad information that you could be searching Google about.
Oh, that's called a transition that you just made, and that was a fantastic one. In fact, let's use that to get started on it. Dr. Google is a thing. People use the internet to ask a lot of questions. Now there's a whole new wrinkle in it. We use AI for this a lot more than we used to, certainly in the early days of AI. And some people think it's pretty good at it, especially in like mental health therapy stuff. It's getting used quite a bit for that sort of thing, for good or for ill. That's a thing that's happening. And it does draw on a long history of content and knowledge to give answers to people that are asking them. But when it comes to your medical health care and me going, hey, why is this? I get this weird mole that showed up out of nowhere. Is there any value? Let's just throw this out early. Any value in me hopping online and going to WebMD and going to Google and checking out all these other places, Reddit forums and everywhere else to find out if this mole is cancer or not, versus like just make an appointment and go get it looked at. Is there value in that? Does that help us get down the road, save you a little bit of time on the front end of it so that when I do come to you, I can say, well, I looked it up and it seemed worse than I was thinking, so that's why I'm coming in today. Because it seems like it's easy to poo-poo this, but maybe it actually helps people get their butts in the office. I don't know.
So say it with me. It can be.
It can be.
It's not as cut and dry as yes or no. The answer is it can be. If you are using healthy sources or good sources or scientifically based sources for your information, absolutely, you can get information that helps you decide, is this something that I need to be more suspect of, or is this something that is fine and I just need to just keep an eye on it and go talk to somebody if it changes. That's kind of the biggest, broadest way that it's going to be helpful. The other thing that it can help you with is understanding terminology, and that can also be a double-edged sword, because if you're using the wrong terms because you think it looks like X, Y, or Z, because a lot of things look alike, then you may actually be putting yourself down the wrong road. And so we want to be careful to use sources of information that are trustworthy, that also have a lot of good scientific basis, not just your cousin who lives down the street and sometimes posts on Reddit. Yeah. You want it to be somebody who has some background. So there are lots of websites that are going to be hosted by the medical society. So if you have a dermatologic condition, going to the American Academy of Dermatology, they have a website. And so you can see what the dermatologists would suggest. And in fact, like for primary care, for family medicine, there's actually a website, familydoctor.org. And I actually put a link in the doc if you wanted to show that at all.
Oh, yeah.
But
there it is.
Familydoctor.org is the patient-facing version of the family medicine website. So the American Academy of Family Physicians, which I've been a part of since I was a first-year medical student, is a huge nationwide conglomeration of primary care physicians in family medicine who have a specialty in family medicine. And they have put together as much patient education as you can potentially think of. Like if there is a question or a problem, they probably have at least something about it. And so places like that are going to be hosted by physicians or by large groups of physicians, especially because we all argue about things, and nobody's if you put 50 doctors in the same room, about 25 of them might agree on half of what you talk about.
Right.
And so that's not to say that we don't agree on the science, but as far as the discussion and how we communicate that, it is usually going to be vetted. Steel sharpens steel in this case, and having a bunch of doctors that are all having the conversation and getting down to the parts that we can talk about and put on the internet, that means that what's out there is usually going to be helpful and usually going to be accurate.
Okay, so here's an example of maybe what somebody might knee-jerk do online. Instead of thinking to go to these reputable sources, we'll talk more about where those are, so people have some good tools here in a second. But I'll give you an example that I have to deal with. I got this ugly mole right here, okay? For those watching video can see it's this big, red, nasty... My mom called them strawberry marks. She has like 100 of them. What are they called?
For the medical people, it's called a cherry hemangioma or just a hemangioma.
Oh, man. I like cherries better than strawberries anyway, so it's fine. But anyway, this thing's pretty big. I'm not going to zoom in on it and ruin everybody's day. But the more the older I've gotten, the more my hair has sort of receded. So this thing became visible at a certain point and had been there a long time. I just didn't know it because my hair had covered it. And it's kind of big and nasty. And once in a while I'll bump it and that hurts and whatever. But every time I go to a doctor or anybody, they always say, oh, it's fine. This is not anything to be worried about. You have a history of these. See that little one on your arm? That's the same thing, just smaller, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Which is great. Great to hear that. But I'll admit there was a time where this started first showing up and I went online and I said to the search, signs of skin cancer or big red, mole.
Yeah, big red mark.
Big red mark. And one of the answers I got, I just did it now to kind of simulate it, but one of these things says common signs of skin cancer include new growth, changes in existing, so on and so forth. And then later it says other symptoms can include sores that do not heal, scaly patches, or bumps that are firm and red. Guess what this is? It's super firm and red. So if I didn't know better and hadn't been looked at by multiple dermatologists and general practitioners, I would probably be a little freaked out when I saw that result. And that seemed like, if there's two edges to this sword, this is the one that makes you bleed a little bit because you panic, you freak out, you lose your mind.
You're right. And it can absolutely overwhelm people when they're getting that flood of information.
Right.
So the way that I explain that is this. The reason that any website that communicates to you medical information has to do that is the legal side of things. Mm-hmm. So let's say that they put out all that stuff and they didn't put firm red nodule as a risk factor. Mm-hmm. And you had a firm red nodule and you didn't go to the dermatologist because they didn't mention it. Mm-hmm. In the United States, if you wanted to, you could go sue them because they put out that information saying that it was clinical information and that they didn't tell you that firm red nodule was a bad sign. So medical legally, anytime anything gets published by a big corporation, so like a Google search, most of the time what you're going to see, especially at the top of those searches, is going to be stuff that has to be legally vetted so that there can't be any question of whether or not they are providing you a medical service and then leading you down a bad path.
Are those laws different in different parts of the world? Not all the same?
There are. They're massively so. Because think about how much difference there is between our free speech laws and the free speech laws in Great Britain, say.
No, that's true. Yeah. More restrictive.
So exactly. So there are things that you can't put into print there that you can here. Mm-hmm. Anybody can put up anything. It's just you may be liable for it in certain situations.
Okay. So when somebody Googles a symptom, what's the most common mistake you see them make interpreting that information? Is it these sources that you're saying we can trust are not being surfaced, and so therefore they're just going with the quick summary or maybe an advertised link or something?
So partly that is going to be a big part of it when you search Google, especially. The information you get is going to be closely tied to the terms that you use. So whatever terms you're using, if there is SEO around those, just like any other internet search engine optimization, there is going to be a bunch of information that somebody has said, oh, I'm going to put in this metadata or other things to bring us to the top. And so, yes, there will be some of that.
Okay.
The bigger concern, though, when we talk about people that are just kind of searching willy-nilly for things, if you just have a problem and you search for it on Google, is the terminology that you use. Because if you are very broad in your terminology, you're going to get a very broad set of results. If you are specific in your description, you may get a narrower set of results, but you may also kind of skip over some of the things that are important when you're describing it, which means that you now have narrowed too far. So there is a Goldilocks zone with that information. Too much information can sometimes be a bad thing. Too little information can be a bad thing. So finding the amount of information that gets you the right answer, that is the real Google foo, if you will, when it comes to medical searches, because there's a lot of information. There are pages and pages and pages and thousands of websites that are going to try to feed you information. How do you sort through that? How do you figure it out? And the short answer is you have to kind of know what to call it. And so that is really, really hard, because the medical terminology we use is going to narrow down your searches and give you a much better, more solid answer, but it's hard to get that terminology correct.
So these sources, we have a little list here: PubMed, Mayo Clinic, Symptom Checker, UpToDate, LexiCorp, and Google Scholar. I have to admit, I think I've only heard of Mayo Clinic. Oh, Comp, not Corp. That sounds like an evil corporation. That's
right. LexiCorp sounds like something from Superman.
Yeah, we don't want that. It really does. It's for his daughter, Lexi. Anyway,
Yeah, there you go.
I've heard of some of these, mostly Mayo Clinic and PubMed, and they are pretty frequently kind of up top. Like you get results, especially Mayo Clinic. What makes them more
Cleveland Clinic?
What makes them more primarily trustworthy versus not?
So most of the things that I listed off in that list are going to be, or that you read off there, those are going to be sources that are vetted by groups of people, not just one. So the kind of like the Wikipedia effect, where you have a bunch of different scholars that are kind of arguing in the background, and then what comes out of it sometimes is sort of the consensus information. It's the stuff that people at least agree on. So you're going to get a really good solid foundation with most of those websites because they're going to have that consensus information as their primary output.
Right.
They also, like PubMed, essentially is a conglomeration of all of the different papers and articles that are written in scientific journals, and you can search through it and dial into it and drill down to get exactly what you're looking for. And so it is a bunch of resources that are going to come from what we call primary sources. So that's kind of when we talk about things to look for, and we're going to get into this more in detail, but when you go to those websites, you're going to get information that is usually coming from the people who did the research to figure out if it was true or if it wasn't, or what the facts are about that particular question.
Right.
And so Mayo Clinic has a massive research arm. They do tons of medical research. Same with Cleveland Clinic. PubMed is actually just a repository of every article ever written from a scientific journal. UpToDate is actually more like Wikipedia for doctors. It's something that patients can access, but lately it's actually moved more toward mostly physician and provider access rather than having a patient-facing portion. There used to be a pretty decent patient-facing search, but I think they've moved away from that. They've changed hands with different company business stuff. And so because of that, it's still very valid. It's still good information, but it's a very high-level scientific set of information. So it is more doctor-centric. LexiComp is the drug guide that goes along with that, and they used to be independent, but they're now owned by the same people that own UpToDate, so they're linked together. But it is sort of the pharmacopoeia. We talked about that a few episodes back, the pharmacopoeia, that idea of all the different medications and what they do and how they do it and what to expect as far as side effects and adverse events and how they interact with things and what are the most common doses and the FDA-approved doses and that kind of thing.
So I'm looking at National Library of Medicine real quick here, or the PubMed, and I have to admit, when I first saw a PubMed link, I thought they were just playing off the name Club Med, and it was like like they're trying to be funny and clever, and that made me not trust it, weirdly.
Sure.
But it literally means like medical published medical documentation. And
Absolutely.
I shouldn't have had that dumb idea in my head, I guess. I really did, though. I saw it and went, PubMed, stop it. It's play on words. I don't need this, but I don't think that's what they're doing.
It is what they're doing. You can go back in time and see that that's what they're actually doing, but they're doing it in a way to be silly about something that is a very serious thing, because it is, like it literally says on the front page, millions of citations.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
And those are basically what you can do in there is you can type in any topic that you can think of and use as much scientific lingo as you can with it.
I'm putting hairy mole in there. Let's see what we get.
I see that.
Yeah. Signaling by sentient. Oh boy, some of these things.
So let me break this down for you. So go back up to the top here, because this is one of those things where the words make a difference. So senescent melanocytes. That means that there are pigmented cells that have essentially gone dormant. Senescent means dormant or something like it, and it hyperactivates hair growth. So when those cells go dormant, they send out a chemical signal that tells certain things to grow hair. That's why some of that pigmented cell, that's why a mole that is pigmented like a dark mole can sometimes get hairy.
Oh.
So it's explaining why that happens.
All right, there's a myth around that if you have a hairy mole, it's a good sign that the mole isn't cancerous because it's got hair in it. Yeah.
So I wish that were entirely true, but it's not that untrue, because honestly, most of the cells that are going to produce hair are not going to be the cells that we see they can. And I don't want to make a blanket statement here and then mislead somebody, but if it has hair on it, it's going to be a little bit less likely to be some of the more dangerous kinds of skin cancers. Melanomas are going to be from a certain cell type, and that certain cell type is going to overgrow, and so it kind of blocks out the cells that are going to grow those hairs. They may still be there. They may still be around, but it's not going to be like a big hairy mole. The bigger thing with most hairy moles is that they're usually what we call well circumscribed. That means that they have a nice solid border, right?
Yeah.
So when a mole has a solid border, that's not kind of all of these little tendrils coming off of it. That's a better sign. It's not necessarily a slam dunk that it's benign, but it is a better sign than if it looks like, a bunch of octopus tentacles flying all over your forehead.
Yeah, which nobody wants that. I found a sentence that I want to try to pronounce. So allow me to try here.
Medical terminology with Scott.
Here we go. This is one I found while looking at hairy moles. Congenital hairy polyp of posterior tonsillar pillar. Pilar? Pillar.
No, pillar, you're right.
Okay.
Tonsillar pillars are the tonsillar pillars are the pink shiny stuff in the back of your throat that runs between the two tonsils, the two lower and two upper tonsils in the back of your throat.
Gotcha.
So when you open your mouth, you look back behind your tongue, you got your pharyngeal tonsils down low and your palatine tonsils up high. And so between those two, there's this sort of glowing tissue or shiny tissue. It doesn't glow. That'd be cool if it glowed.
I want
but the
it to
shiny
glow.
tissue, when you shine a light on it, it reflects it back because
Right.
of the saliva that's coating it and stuff, mucus. But so it's a tonsillar pillar and it runs up and down. That's why we call it a pillar.
Is that where we get our tonsil stones or whatever they're called? The little white.
You can in the tonsils
things?
themselves. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in the tonsils themselves, and that actually happens in the tonsillar crypts. So there's a great word for you.
A tonsillar
crypt.
crypt? Let's have a D&D campaign and roll some dice in there. That's nasty. Oh my gosh, I love it. All right, let's talk about for a second. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Are there certain health topics that tend to be more accurately represented online than others? And then on top of that, I just want to ask this question around all of this, and this question seemed like a good place to have it.
Sure.
Generality, that's not a word. Generalness seems dangerous. In other words, because a website might be afraid of what could happen legally if they give bad advice, then you almost always are going to get a generalized, there's the word I was looking for. You're going to always get a generalized answer because they're trying to not create opportunity for litigation. And they're always going to tell you, yeah, it looks like you got a hairy mole there. Those are usually fine. Sometimes they're not. Anyway, talk to your doctor. Like they're never going to give you a exacting to a needle point diagnosis of what's going on, no matter what it is, right? That's the way of it.
It is the bottom line.
Yeah. Okay. So just know that,
yes,
people,
you are
when you
correct.
go in there to do this search, that's why you're not getting that level of specificity, because they don't want to get sued if you're wrong or if they're wrong, and they encourage you to do something you shouldn't, or they say, it looks fine. You walk away and then you find out later it wasn't fine. Like either way, they don't want to get sued. That's it. Right.
And the problem with that specificity is also, if you're asking a question that is broad, then your answer is going to be broad. And so they don't want to give you specificity because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to give you bad information. They don't want to tell you something that says, all right, can you hear my dogs?
only a little bit, barely though. It's a good sign. It's a sign of life, I think, when you have a dog around.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
It's not a problem.
They're way louder than I ever expected them to be. I'm in a closet behind a door. Anyway. All right. So when they're giving you an answer, especially a generalized answer, it is because you asked a generalized question most of the time.
Right.
And so if you ask very specific questions, you may get more specific answers. But the problem is that if you're asking the wrong question, and this is not a good, bad, or right, wrong kind of thing. This is the information is incorrect. So let's say you said, does melanoma look like this? That question is a very specific question, and it's really hard for anyone to answer that because melanoma can look like a lot of different things, right?
Sure.
So there isn't a single answer for that question, but if somebody gives you a definitive answer, that could be a problem. And so they're going to give a very generalized answer so that they're not leading you down the wrong path, especially if you ask a question that could potentially have an answer that leads you to get poor medical advice or poor medical outcomes.
Okay.
So they don't want to hurt you.
Right.
They're not doing this. Some of them are doing it to make money, but none of them are doing it just to make money.
Right.
It is information that's out there to help you understand what kind of things could be going on, and then point you in the right direction of, is this something that needs to see a doctor or is it something that doesn't? And the more times you ask that question, the more often you're going to get the answer. You probably just need to ask an actual doctor.
Right. Now,
So that is absolutely true.
So let's swing it back around to this idea of certain health topics being more or less accurate as represented by online searches. It sounds like no. Like it's kind of the same problem across the board. You may think of one as more severe, but it's not like your answers are going to be, they're not going to vary that much. If you say, I'm not hungry today, is there a reason for that? And you might get a bunch of general answers for that. But you could also say, I think there's a worm in my butt. That's a much different kind of question, but you shouldn't, I don't think, expect crazy amounts of variation on the kinds of results you're going to get. You're going to get, the topic's going to change, but other than that, they're still going to tell you, could be this, could be that, go to your doctor, right?
As long as it is either a primary source or a collecting source like Mayo, then yes. Anything outside of that, they could absolutely tell you things that are untrue because it's the internet.
Right.
So if you trust the source, which is that's the core of this conversation. If you trust the source, then you can trust the information that it's giving you. If you don't trust the source or you don't know, then you have to take everything that you read with a grain of salt because context is everything, right? Mm-hmm. If you're putting in a more specific search or you're searching in a place where the answers are going to be, let's say that they're trying to sell you something. Mm-hmm. So you're asking the people that are selling a supplement. So to go back to the last discussion, the people that are selling a supplement for weight loss, and you're asking them, does me losing 20 pounds in 2 days, is that a bad sign?
Yeah.
They're probably going to tell you, no, take our product. If you lost 20 pounds in 2 days, that's going to be great for you. You're losing your weight. It's just the water coming off or whatever. They're not going to have as much. This is a blanket statement and I need to be careful with this, but most of those folks, if they're trying to sell you something, they're not going to have as negative things to say about or suspicious things to say, the feeling of suspicion about the topic that you're asking about if it's what they're trying to sell you.
Oh, right. And it's not even it's not even like they're being terrible about it. It's just that's the tunnel they're in. And you're in the tunnel with them.
Question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're not there to diagnose anything. They're not there to make sure that your particular biology as an individual is behaving the way it's supposed to with their stuff. They just know that their stuff in a general way shouldn't be harming people. And so they're going to push it that direction. Whereas a doctor has a built-in motivation for your well-being, or they're out of the business. You know what I mean? For the most part. Yeah. Like I can't go into Dr. Tolbert's office and go, what's this? And you go, for all I know, that's ghosts. He probably can't get away with that for very long. You know what I mean?
So in some cases, yes. In some cases, if it's the only doctor you've got in a 30-mile radius and that's your only option, they can get away with a lot of things. They can say a lot of things, and you don't really have a lot of a choice. So it can be very difficult. So when you're talking to the doctor about things, just like if you're using any of these sources, you want to make sure that you trust the source. So if you've gotten information like that before, make sure you take it with a grain of salt. That's true of a person just as much as it is a website.
Yeah, that's true. So we've kind of answered this question, but is there really even a way for an average person to tell? We've talked about how if they're selling something, then they're selling something. If they're there to be a repository of information, perhaps that's more trustworthy.
Right.
But other than hearing you talk on this show and to whatever audience we reach with that, I feel like we're doing that. We're doing a real service in those people hearing this.
Sure.
But for people that don't, I know I've been in times in my life where I felt like I didn't have answers. Like you'd go to a doctor and then go, you seem fine. Blood work's good. See you later. It's like not a big deal. But you go home and you're like, it's still bugging me. How come, and then you start to go, well, I don't think my doctor really cares that much. He's not really looking that hard. And we talked a little bit about that relationship of, the transactional nature of you, the patient, and the doctor. And it's not only your right, but your imperative to ask questions, hard ones even, just really dig in. And, your job isn't to just go, oh, okay, see you later. Charge me $75 for this visit. Like it's different. It's more complicated than that, like everything else. But is there a way, like, to just recognize the red flag from the green flag? Because sometimes we're colorblind to that stuff,
For sure. If it's talking in absolutes, that's going to be a red flag. So any website that tells you it is exactly this or it is exactly that, be very careful. And that actually bleeds into some of the discussion on things that you brought up at the beginning, like AI.
Oh, yeah.
AI, especially at the very beginning, was very much about absolutes.
Right.
It would just spit out an answer, and it would say, there's no room for error. It never explicitly said, everything I'm telling you is everything you need to know. But the way that those explanations were produced made it sound like this was a definitive answer, and there is no, this is how it is.
Yeah, worst part
And I'm
about
basing
that
that on scientific information.
You'd come back to it and go, well, actually, it's so-and-so discovered this. And they go, you're right. So-and-so discovered it. It's like, it was so wishy-washy. It was certain in its answers until you contradicted it. And it was like, you're right. That is wrong. You know what? You're right. Like, it was infuriating early on to ask it anything serious. Like, it was great at saying, hey, I've got a paragraph that's like way too long. Shorten it down to a sentence, but keep all the meaning. Bam. Wow. Magic. It's amazing. Like some of that functional stuff, really cool in the early days. Has that gotten better? The more complex questions and answers in your view?
To some degree, yes. To some degree, no. As most recently as GPT-4, even 4.0, there are still times where it will hallucinate answers because all it is doing is picking words that go together. And so when we talk about scientific literature, there's a bunch of it out there. So you could train an AI on that scientific literature, and as long as one word follows another, even if it's on a totally disparate topic, if that's happening often enough, it's going to put those words together. So it's not searching for things, at least at that level. Now, with some of the recent changes, it's gotten better. It is actually trying to get to a certain point. But if you look at if you say cite your sources, you type that in as a prompt, and it gives you an article, you absolutely have to go to that article and make sure that it is an article about the thing that it said it was about and that it even exists to begin with.
Or it came from a place of reputation, like you were saying earlier, a place you trust.
Yeah, but so a lot of those, the journal, it will tell you. And the more you're in healthcare, and especially the more you do biostatistics and epidemiology, the more you know which journals to look at and which journals to say, oh, that journal. Because there are actually journals that are being published just so that people can get papers out there, so that they can get jobs, so that they can continue to have funding, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it does happen. Just like every other form of work, there are people that are doing it just for the money, right? So you have to be careful even in that situation. But there's this hierarchy of information, and what we have to look at is the most of the time the AI, and even on websites, you have to be careful because they're not giving you that background sometimes. If they don't do that, if they don't give you the origin for the research that they're coming from, or they don't give you links to potential sources, like primary sources of data, that's another big red flag. And that's a big thing that happens with AI. There's this hierarchy of research that we talk about.
Sure.
And I'm just going to kind of quickly go through that because it's really kind of important, because if you look at what you can trust, and as far as scientific data, what you can trust and what is suspect, that's kind of generalized across evidence in general when it comes to science, but medicine in particular, it's incredibly important. And so we talk about, is it somebody's anecdotal evidence? That's the lowest rung. And so anecdotal evidence is, I had a patient that had this happen once and this is what happened. So I had a patient with a big red bump and it turns out that they had face cancer. So
I've never heard it called face cancer before, but all right.
Right.
I like it.
So But that's what we call anecdotal evidence, and it is the lowest rung of usefulness,
right?
In terms of applicability to the entire population, to every person, regardless of what their demographics are and who they are and where they come from, that kind of stuff. It is not applicable to everybody. It's applicable to that one person, maybe, and maybe even then it's not applicable.
All right.
The next step up would be like an expert opinion or a case series, which is when, let's say, a doctor has seen 15 or 20 cases and they all follow this same pattern. So that's more than one, and it's kind of following, you have information about where these people came from. Are they all in the same area? Are they all from the same social group or cultural group? Do they all have the same genetic history? That kind of thing. And then you have expert opinion, which is, well, I've seen a bunch of different things that are very much like this, and so it seems like this should be the right scientific answer.
Oh, interesting.
So that's the next step up.
These are all like anecdotal 1.0, 2.0. Like,
kind of. It is a little bit stronger than anecdotal. Anecdotal is just, I'm telling a story. Right. So I had this patient one time. There's all kinds of stories that start that way, and especially in medicine, you hear all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah.
And that's really, personal information falls into that category.
Yeah.
One time, my leg hurt, and it turns out I had a worm under the skin, right? So that is anecdotal. It's a story.
Right.
So that's lowest. Then we go expert opinion and case series. Then we go to cross-sectional studies. So that's basically we take a whole group of people and we look at them at one point in time and we see what that says. And then you go up from that to case control studies. That means you take two groups of people, one group that you know didn't have a thing and another group that did have that thing, like an intervention, like a test or a medicine or something else. And you look at them as, well, this group that didn't have it, this is what happened, and this group that did have it, this is what happened, and you're doing that after the fact, after they've already had it. So you don't have a way to make sure that group that's called a control group, the group that doesn't have the intervention, you don't have a way to check to see if there are other things about them that match. You just get what you get.
Right.
So it's not like a randomized controlled trial, which is at the top.
Okay.
And so randomized controlled trials, we look at, okay, we've got this group, we've got this group. They kind of match in terms of demographics. So the same number of women, the same number of people over 45, the same number of Hispanics, whatever the breakdown numbers need to be.
Sure.
We've got the same numbers in both groups.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're controlling for all of those other variables. And the only thing we're changing between these two groups is we're going to give one treatment and one not. And then we're going to watch what happens to them over time.
Right.
So that's a case.
Is it always placebo on the other side? That's just the placebo double blind
technically,
business?
yes.
Yeah.
Technically, yes, but sometimes it's not because it can be called sham or placebo, either one. So a placebo would be something that you give, like a medicine. Sham would be used a lot of times when we talk about things like surgery. So they won't do a procedure and they will do a procedure. And the sham surgery is one where they do all the same trappings, but they end up not doing the actual surgery.
Oh, so you can put a guy to sleep. Does it go like that far where it's like, okay, old Mr. Wilson's laying on the operating table and we maybe scratched him so he felt something. I mean, like, how do you fool a guy into thinking he's had surgery? That's crazy.
So you do all the same things that you would normally do for a surgery. You put bandages on the things and you just don't let them know that there's nothing there.
Wow. Never heard of that. That's called sham?
It's called sham surgery or any kind of sham procedure. It's usually not surgery. It's usually going to be for things that are a lot more easy to not. Like, it's obvious when you've had surgery most of the time.
Right.
So it's going to be other things but that's kind of an extreme example. They can do that. Sham surgery is
That's wild. Giving it the name sham is quite the move.
Well, in medicine, we if anything, we're honest.
Wow.
Most of the time. Anyway, so then above the randomized control trials is something called a meta-analysis. And so that is kind of what you want to be looking for if you're really looking for, what happens when you have this. What are the outcomes? What do I need to be afraid of? What do I need to be looking for?
Yeah.
Because the meta-analysis is going to look at a bunch of randomized controlled trials and cohort studies and case control studies, and it's going to say, all right, we're going to take all of those people, and as long as they're asking the same question, or the data is there for us to ask the same question, we're going to look at the outcomes based on all of that. So we're going to control for even more variables. We're going to look at much bigger populations, much larger numbers of people.
Oh.
And then see if they have similar outcomes. So that is important to know. So like if you're looking at a primary source and it says this is a meta-analysis, that's going to give you an idea that it really probably knows what it's talking about. It also may, in some meta-analysis, they get in there and they say there aren't enough studies that actually tell us anything. So you may look it up. You may think, I need to find out what's going on with this. And you go to the research and it says, we don't know. And so you kind of have to be ready for that just as much as you're ready to get an answer of a sort of positive sort, quote unquote, where you have information to work with. The answer may be, we don't know.
Yeah, it could be that. Do you ever wish that you'd have gotten more into the research side of things? Has that ever been a thing for you?
Not really.
Not really?
It can get very tedious in terms of you have to be day in and day out making sure that you're not losing people to follow up and making sure that they're doing the things that you need them to do, especially in medical surgery, or medical research, not surgery.
Right.
And so I don't have a personality for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm very much in the camp of I'm going to help you get the information you need to make a decision. But I don't make the decision for you. You make the decision, and I want you to have the tools to make an informed decision and a good decision. But I'm not going to go to your house and poke you with a stick every time you make the decision.
Yeah, it's good though that you've got these two seemingly different disciplines almost. Not really though. I mean, obviously they coexist, but one discipline being that very regimented, call it tedium, but it could be, see it as just, some people love that kind of stuff as the part of their work, having these large systems to manage. And then the patient end, which is where you are, is obviously a very different discipline. But I think those two, obviously we need those two things, right? Can't have just the one. Sure.
Absolutely. I can't do anything without the bench scientist doing the research and telling me what's true.
Right. So here's one for you. If a patient comes in and you go, well, hello, Mrs. Wilson. It's nice to meet you. I don't know why I keep using Wilson. We got a lot of Wilsons. My grandma's name was Wilson. So
Wilson's disease is actually a copper deficiency. Well, copper processing.
That's a thing, issue. Really?
Yeah, it's called Wilson's disease.
Who's that? Who's it named? Obviously somebody named Wilson. Was it a doctor named Wilson?
Yeah, it was named after. It's called an eponym. It's just anything that's named after a person. So Wilson's disease, and it's too much copper, and it causes something called Kaiser-Fleischer rings. If you ever want to look that up, it's a fun.
Kaiser-Fleischer rings.
Mm-hmm. So on your eye, you will see this copper-colored, or alternately, it's a slightly different colored ring around the iris of your eye.
Can you see it as the person, or only others looking at you?
Everybody can see it. Well, you can't see it looking out, but if you look in a mirror, you will see it around their iris.
Oh, wild. Is that a terrible thing? Is that going to make you blind one day?
Well, it can be. Any kind of genetic disease where you can't process certain things. If you get too much of those things coming in, then your body's going to get overwhelmed and it can cause lots of disease process.
Yeah.
So it can be.
Okay.
But it oftentimes takes a while for it to build up, and so it can be something where you don't even know it's a problem until you get later in life.
See, look at these little extras we're giving people. Total tangent, but you just learned about Wilson's disease and that other thing that sounded like a 1920s nightmare, whatever that name of the Kaiser Wolfram, whatever. What was it?
So Kaiser-Fleischer rings. It's another two guys' names. So one guy named Kaiser, one guy named Fleischer. And actually, I don't even know if that's true. It may have been a hyphenated last name. I honestly don't remember. I just remember in terms of with board questions, whenever you have a question on your medical boards, so the tests that we take to say, you know what you need to know to be a doctor, those are some of the quick things to remember, because that's going to be the clue in the prompt that tells you what the answer is going to be.
They sound like studio heads in like 1930s Hollywood. Kaiser, Fleischer, get in here. We got to make a movie. Yeah. See? Yeah. All right. So they come in. Mr. Wilson comes in, Mrs. Wilson, whoever, and they say, hey, I've been going through this, and you're asking them, well, tell me what's wrong, or what are you feeling, or whatever. And they say, now I did a bunch of my own research. All right. Mm-hmm. I don't want to overly stereotype anybody, but
I was say if they say it like that, then I do kind of get my hackles get up just a little bit.
Well, that's the question: is they it can feel like I had all the resources and did a bunch of work before I got here. So me and you are partners in this diagnosis. They can have that confidence coming in there.
So confidence isn't bad, and we are partners. So those two concepts are actually very accurate and very good. I want to be a partner. I want to be somebody who is helping you come to the right decision based on working together. So I'm not going to complain about that at all.
Yeah.
My concern is if they say they already know what's wrong. If they already know what's wrong, then they don't need me.
Right.
Because my job as a primary care physician, people don't think about it this way, but I am a diagnostician. My job is to take in large volumes of information, to process it, and then help you understand how it works and what's happening and how it goes together, and does it go together, and are these pieces pertinent and are they not? Right. That is really my job. So I'm a human AI. In that situation, I'm an LLM.
Okay. But you're not hallucinating as much.
But I'm not hallucinating as much. Valid concern, because it does happen. If you get down a wrong pathway, we talk about that all the time in medicine. There may be certain biases that bring us to the wrong answer.
Sure.
But I am a diagnostician. So I am doing on a larger scale what those things are doing on the computer scale. So if you go to that information, let's say Mr. Wilson went to the internet and he got his information, and he comes in and he says, I've got gout. I'm going to say, okay, so why do you need me?
It's a great opening line for his date, for his blind date.
But again,
I've got gout.
Right? Well, but if you already know what's wrong, then at this point, if you're coming at it from, well, I've had gout for 30 years, and we know that you've had gout for 30 years, and you come in and you say, my gout's flaring up, that's great. If you've never had gout before and you come in and you say, I am 100% certain that my sore toe is gout, and then we look at your toe and you've got a massive abscess, well, you can be led down the primrose path by some of this data, especially if you're just trying to get to something that's easy, right? That's the big, when we talk about big headlines with fine print, the reason that those are out there is because it's easy, right? It's easy to say 5 words and then run away.
Right.
It's harder to actually explain what's going on and be specific about things And so when we work together to come to that understanding of what's going on, you come in with information. You say, my toe hurts, it's big and red. Even if I rub this sheet across it, it feels like somebody is stabbing me with a knife. If you say those 3 sentences, I'm going to look at you and say, you've got gout. So from that standpoint, we can get to the same answer without presupposing the answer, without saying, well, this is what it has to be ahead of time. But it comes from that conversation of, help me understand why you think you've got gout. So my response, if Mr. Wilson comes in and says, I've got gout, my first question is going to be, okay, what set of symptoms have you had that have led up to this point that have made you think that you have gout? And I'm not questioning him. He may be right.
No, that's great.
I'm trying to get the information so that we can synthesize all of the information. We don't want to miss pieces, right? Because then we say, okay, well, it's big and red and swollen. It hurts every time you touch it. The sheet pulling across it makes it feel like it's getting stabbed. But then we look at it, and all of a sudden, there's this massive pustule on the side that has these massive, red tentacles or tendrils kind of spreading out from it. Not actual tentacles, not like the rabbit virus.
Love that.
But if there's redness extending up your leg, you could have an infection. And if you have an infection, we don't want to miss that. It could be gout, because gout can cause some of those things to happen, but it usually doesn't.
Right.
So we have to work together to say, all right, well, what things lead you to that decision? What things lead you to that conclusion? Because that is the important information. So if you come into the doctor's office and you say, this is what I've got, this is what I need, the doctor's going to look at you and they're going to kind of bristle. They're going to say, I don't know. And if a doctor isn't prepared for that, or they're young, or they just don't like that kind of thing, you may get really bad, conversation, really bad communication, because they're already kind of on the defensive, because why are you even here to see me?
Yeah. And this must be hard though, because you guys, if I were a doctor and you're seeing people constantly, right? Just bam, 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 bam. They're all different personalities and everything. There's a real discipline, I guess, in taking that approach and then applying it to the unique individual in front of you, because obviously every interaction is going to be different. Honestly, it's not all that different than interviewing people. If I interview one person and then somebody later, or even just a co-host I have, the experience is often drastically different. So my approach, while fundamentally the same, I have to veer, I have to adjust myself. And it feels like that's just would be hard for a doctor. Like your initial reaction might be, they come in screaming about how they did their research. That's what they lead with. And my reaction would be like, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's, and now what you got is this like adversarial thing. And what you said instead was almost like, I don't know, throw it back on them a little bit and say, oh, interesting. What have you done, or where have you been to come to this conclusion? That's probably for some harder than others, but I think that's probably the right thing, if I had to guess. For most patients, if I had to guess.
For most people, the key to communicating with a doctor is understanding that every doctor is a person, unless it's Dr. Google, right?
Yeah.
So you are talking to another person, and here's something to blow your mind. When we learn in class how to do a medical history, to understand what's going on, to talk to the patient, we call it medical interviewing. That's literally the name of the class.
Jeez.
So we are interviewing people. That's what we're doing, because we are asking you questions about what has happened so that we can help you synthesize that information into a true diagnosis. It's called a differential diagnosis. So we give this list of things. What's the most likely? What's the least likely? What are the things that we can do to figure out which on that list is the right one? Mm-hmm. That is the process that we are supposed to go through. And we are trained on how to do that. I have books on the shelf below this one. There are books that are literally on medical interviewing, how to do it, how best to talk to somebody, how do you interact with people. And we do classes on how to do that with what are called standardized patients. So people that are paid to come in and pretend to have a thing. Most of them are acting students or theater students, but there are people that do it as part of their living. We had several patients that were retired patients that would people that are retired that would come in and help train the doctors. And so we learn how to interview people and to ask questions and to understand what's going on so that we can synthesize that information. And that gets lost sometimes because in the age of CT scans and fast laboratory values and ultrasounds, we have to be careful not to get too far ahead of ourselves are in both the doctor's shoes and in the patient's shoes, because we think, oh, well, this is the answer and this is what's happening. And we want a definitive answer and we want to come to the right answer because that's what we want. We want to not hurt anymore, or we want to not have this disease, or we want to fix this disease and feel better. And that's a valid way to feel. But if we get too far ahead of ourselves, then we can do more damage than good. And so we have to be careful. And so that interviewing part of things is absolutely critical to coming to a good understanding. And that's why that discussion between patient and doctor is so important. You need somebody who is going to step back and say, as far as the physician goes, help me understand why you feel that way, and then help me understand what what's been going on with you. Help me to see from your perspective what's been happening.
Yeah.
How does it feel? Absolutely. But what else has been happening? Are there other things that you've done? When did it start? How did it start? There's actually a whole list of questions that we learn. We have to memorize, essentially: location, quality, severity, timing, mitigating factors, improving factors, worsening factors. There's this big long list of things that we need to ask about. And then once we have all of those pieces, we have most of what we need to understand the problem. And
I was going to say that you've kind of, in a weird way, this is kind of a Jeopardy question. Essentially, you're saying work together and ask questions. And the answer, the question to that you would hear in Jeopardy as the answer is there a healthy way to blend your online research that you did yourself and your doctor's advice instead of one replacing the other?
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, this is just a simple human construct of, more basic than that. I mean, obviously, it's very specific to their condition, your skills as a diagnostician. Is that what you called yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I don't know. I'm sure it varies in quality depending on what doctor you go to, but
absolutely.
Just know they're getting, it sounds like they're getting some training or being asked to read up on or study, or maybe you have to show up for seminars. I don't know what you guys have to do.
Yeah, all of those things.
Yeah.
We have to do all of those things. And then as third and fourth year medical students, our job is to learn how to take that and then write it down and create a note, because the doctor's note originally, before it became a billing document, which is a valid way to use it at this point, but it's not its original intent. The original intent of a doctor's note was so that when I look back at it later, I know what I was talking to you about. I've got those pieces of history that tell me, okay, well, I know that the last time we talked about this, your left ankle was hurting. This time now you've got right ankle pain.
Yeah.
And it's, and it's following this pattern. So we know to say, oh, well, the last time you were doing some extra running, you had just started a new running regime. Has that changed? Are you still running? Have you tried to increase your distances or increase your speeds? Have you changed your shoes? There are all kinds of things that past document information can actually even lead into, and that's why continuity of care with a patient is also important. So having a doctor that you trust, that you can see on a routine basis, incredibly important. It can be very difficult, especially in certain areas of the country and in certain parts of the world. You don't have that continuity. You see whoever you see because that's who's in the office that day, and that happens. But if the notes are good, then the person that's seeing you should be able to look back at that and glean that information. And again, it goes back to this idea that in a perfect world, we would all be doing that as physicians, but it's not. And so we have to understand that, there are going to be times where it's hit or miss, and that people are people. And so as we talk to each other, as we have those conversations, it's going to help build that rapport. But it is entirely about collecting that information and synthesizing it so that you can have, the right tools in your toolbox. I tell people all the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if is there any truth to this? This is such an offshoot. I don't know why I'm thinking about it, because you talk about taking good notes, right? That's good. And most of it's all on computers. People are typing stuff in now, but what is it just a myth that all doctors have terrible handwriting?
It is.
Okay.
So it's because of several different factors. We get very tired of signing our names, because we signed our names for much of history. And even today, I still sign my name probably 70 or 80 times a day.
That's a lot. Jeez.
It is. And so my signature is just a couple of loops. Yeah. Anybody who's seen my physician signature, it's not easy to reproduce. So it can't be plagiarized as easily, but it is very easy for me to do so that I can just sign off and move on.
Right.
I also block print, because in high school I took a drafting class and I fell in love with block printing because it was easy to read and everybody could understand it. And so I block print everything. And so usually, unless I'm incredibly tired, most of my handwriting is very legible. Yeah. You cannot mistake one word for another. Yeah. And especially if I'm block printing.
Good block printing looks great. by the way.
Exactly. And that's the other reason I like it. I'm not a huge neat freak. I don't make lists. I don't have lots of written things that I do myself. But when I do write things, I want them to be legible. I want them to be concise. And I want them to be... And the other thing with these forms, this is another Dr. rant. You're talking about tangents.
Yeah.
They give you this much space to put in information that really should take up this much. And I've gotten better at not being as verbose, but as people can tell, I like to talk and I like to be specific. So I have to fit it into a tiny little space. So when I block print, I can actually control the size of that block printing much better than I could if I was trying to write in cursive or other things like that.
Yeah.
So, but most of that myth comes from prescriptions. And the reason is because, one, people didn't want counterfeited prescriptions.
Right.
But two, if you're writing 17, 18, 25 prescriptions a day, it's going to get tedious. And so especially if you are just trying to get it fast so that you can hand it off and go.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of that kind of came from.
Yeah. And it's basically writing in all caps, kind of.
Now, block printing, yeah. But in terms of prescriptions, if you didn't do that,
right.
like I'm just talking about like the bad handwriting thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So the bad handwriting thing, that came from people writing prescriptions just over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Now everything has to be digital for the most part because most pharmacies are not, they can still accept paper scripts, but they don't like it. And actually Medicare prefers and has a kind of a written rule that says that everything should be electronic if it can be.
I have an eye doctor who I go to every year, and he has the worst handwriting I've ever seen in my entire life. And I think that's very ironic that my eye doctor has such crappy writing. I always love that about him. Anyway.
Especially since they do surgery on such a tiny...
I know, that's what I'm saying. He did a thing. He had to do a procedure on me to laser off some excess crap in my eye, and then he wrote later, and I went, are you the same person? What is this?
He's not used to the big movements. It's too much.
I guess so. It's pretty crazy. So all right.
So what I started to say earlier.
Yes, I didn't mean
just
to
as a closing
take
thought,
us
because
off
this
the
is
road there. Yeah.
No, it's okay. This is it actually brings it all together because it is pertinent to the writing. Because another tool of the physician is the stethoscope, and I usually say to patients, I can teach a monkey how to use a stethoscope.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about my stethoscope that's not what makes me a doctor. The white coat is not what makes me a doctor. What makes me a doctor is the volume of knowledge and the ability to synthesize it that I have inside my head and my ability to communicate that to you. Mm-hmm. And that is what makes a doctor different from other people on the street. That is what makes a doctor different than Google. And so what we have to be able to understand is, eventually AI is going to get to be able to do that because it doesn't forget things. So it has perfect memory. And that is huge. And so that's why doctors working with AI can actually make things even better than if you did just AI or just a doctor. So that synthesis of those two things is incredibly important because when we use AI, it can now remind us of things that we didn't know or tell us about things that we didn't think about. And it allows us to have a much broader base of knowledge that then we can then synthesize and talk about what it means and how statistically significant it is and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that is, in terms of what's out there and what's coming, it is a rising road. It is, there are flashy billboards right now on the road.
Yeah.
Oh, hey.
I love this.
5 miles.
This is a great analogy, by the way. I'm a huge fan of the future is a rising road. I've never thought about how many flashy billboards are around it, though.
Right. And so these are all these flashy billboards. 10 miles, we're going to see this. And 20 miles, we're going to see this. And 5 miles, you're going to get there. We're almost there. We're almost there.
Yeah.
And you're going to see that. And that's what a lot of these headlines are. They're things that, we've got this information and we just don't know what to do with it yet.
Right.
And so, but people want to run with it. It's exciting. The fact that we could have a way to change type 1 diabetes forever. I talked about that in a previous episode. That is huge. It makes me excited because type 1 diabetes is a horrible disease. And I've lost family members to type 1 diabetes. When I was a kid, my dad lost his cousin and one of his closest relatives, one of his closest friends growing up. He lost him to type 1 diabetes. Jeez. And it was a massive hit to him. And he is probably one of the most knowledgeable family doctors as far as it comes to diabetes that I know because of that. And I don't even think he realizes that. That's part of why he's so good at it.
Yeah.
But the idea is there are all these things that you're seeing that are coming out, and it's this is the flashy headline, and this is the flashy headline, and it's there. It's on the horizon. It's coming. But what we do on day-to-day in the office is really more about, well, this is what we know, and statistically this is most likely, so this is what we're going to be careful of. And if we get more information and it points us down that flashy new road, great. Then we will take it to its eventual end. We'll get off that exit and see what we see.
Right.
But in general, we are learning more and getting more information and getting more understanding of how things work. And sometimes we're wrong about it and we make a wrong turn and we got to backtrack and come back the other way. But it is continually that rising road, like we said. So it is. There are amazing things coming when it comes to AI and physicians working together. There are amazing things coming when it comes to scientific discovery, and more every day. And that's not, no matter how hard people are trying, that's not going to change.
Right.
It is still the way that we are headed.
It's always the road too. Like the road doesn't change that often. We'd have to, I don't know, nuke ourselves to really slow things down. Not saying we should. I'm just saying,
We don't want to.
No. And I feel like I could diagnose that pretty well if that happened. I'd be able to do it without Dr. Jerry's help. One of the resources that we're going to put in the show notes, I'll put this in the RSS feed, so this will be part of any player you pick up and you're looking at the notes for the episode. I'm going to have all of these in there so you can easily access them. But one of them is an interesting one, Symptom Checker. This is part of Mayo Clinic's website, and it is specifically a site for checking these things. In fact, the first one it leads off with examples is foot pain, funny enough, because we were just talking about that. But anyway, you think this is a good resource, and this is something I would have normally been skeptical of, except, Mayo Clinic, big deal. They're not like some small organization. They're not known for steering people in the wrong direction. So obviously there's more to it. But the idea that there's a place that I could go initially do some of this and go, all right, I got foot pain or ankle pain. All right, cool. And then you answer some other factors, and they kind of just narrow it down to what things possibly could be. This sure seems like a better way than just random searching to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's also another symptom checker on familydoctor.org. So definitely put that one in the notes as well. Those two are really good resources, and they do those will get more powerful as we use the LLM models on that data, because that is vetted by physicians. And so the underlying data set is very robust, which means that when you add the LLM into it, the outcomes are more robust. So those types of chatbots that you're going to start to see on hospital websites and other places, those are being built around this idea that we have all of this physician-generated information, the scientist-generated information, and we can train people to answer those questions in a way that is going to be more effective. We're still away from that. We're not here yet, but it's getting better.
We're getting there,
and that's the kind of stuff that these are not based on an LLM. They are it's basically a algorithm. So if you have this, these are the questions we ask. And that's going to be true in the office. That should be what I'm asking you when you walk in. Okay, you have foot pain? Well, where does it hurt? If you're going to point and show me the one spot, how long has it lasted? When did it start? Did you do anything right before it happened? Is anything making it better? Did you take anything that made it worse, or do anything that made it worse? All of those questions are what this is going to ask you. So
I could also see a day sooner than later where you have tablets out in your front office, and the nurse, I assume so. And like that's already a thing you do where you write down your stuff, right? But one that comes where an LLM that is trained specifically on medical data in these specifics, which is a much more controlled environment than just asking GPT, what time it is. Absolutely. And then they do that in the waiting room. 10 minutes later, you've got way more info than you would have had if they tried to remember everything. Or
we already do that. We've actually been doing a variant of that for over a decade.
Wow, that's great.
And it depends on what hospital system you're with and which EMR you're using and how advanced they are in terms of their understanding of technology. But we were building processes like that into our intake. So when people come into the office, we've been trying to build processes like that for decades. And it's always been a part of medicine. You always had a piece of paper that you were filling out or other things. Now it's a tablet or it's a kiosk or it's other things. But that's becoming even the mainstay. Like if you go online now with our hospital system, and I'm not bragging about them, not trying to advertise them, I'm not even going to say the name. I love them. They pay me well. But the health system I work for, if you go online to our website, there is a symptom checker that will tell you, okay, let's go through your symptoms. Let's ask these questions. You answer them honestly as you can to the best of your ability. And then with the answers that we get, we can say, oh, well, you need to go to the ER, or you need to go to urgent care, or you should call your primary care doctor, or you should, do these things. And it points you to the right place to ask the questions further. And so that is a huge thing that we're doing right now is triage. That just means that we're dividing people up. Anybody that watched The Pit or ER or those kinds of shows, they talk about triage. That's the first, when you walk through the door, are you somebody who's in dire straits and needs to be seen right this minute? Can you wait for an hour? Can you wait for 5 hours? So that kind of triage, is this where you need to be? Where do you need to go to get this taken care of? That is being done that way right now. And that's even being done by some of these chatbots that are driven by an LLM. They're AI, not AI, but what we're calling AI.
My introduction to triage was MASH, and that'll mess with a
absolutely.
kid. You know, when you're a young kid, you're
Absolutely.
like, that's a bloody horrible room. I don't want to go in there.
Yeah.
A little more controlled
Field
now,
triage. Field triage, absolutely not. My dad's a retired full burn Army colonel, and so he's got all kinds of stories.
Oh man, does he ever tell you to drop and to give me 20 or any of that kind of thing?
He used to when I was younger. Now he knows I'm old, and I'll just break a hip if I try to.
Yeah, he knows the medical implications of what he's demanding now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Well, I'm gonna like I said, I'm gonna put all these links in our show notes. You'll have them no matter where you get the show. I'll put them in the YouTube version as well. So you guys will have these links active down there. Just to sort of select links of the places that Jerry recommends the most, the trustworthy sources. I mean, I have to admit, some of these I'd never heard of, and that's how the internet works. It doesn't always surface the good stuff. So knowing what those things are for the next time you need to kind of go poke around about yourself, well, here's a few of those. And as far as this show goes, our plan is to continue on with a season 2. Not sure quite when that's going to be yet or what we're going to be covering, but we'll do a little bit of what's the opposite of triage? Post-op.
So post-mortem.
Post-mortem. That's when someone's dead, though. Right?
Right, but it's after the thing is finished.
Okay.
So in this case, life.
Okay. No, okay. So you can say postmortem about anything. It's like if you go to, hey, we went to a movie, let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. It could be like that, right?
Yep, it's a wrap-up.
We're going to do a bit of that. We'll do our postmortem. We'll decide what we think, what we want to do. We'll probably have a little survey out for you guys about what you thought of the show, what you might want to see in future episodes, that kind of thing. But I can tell you, I had a blast doing these first 6, and I look forward to more. Dr. Jerry, anything you'd like to say before we head out today?
Just thanks for the opportunity to come on and talk about all this stuff, because I feel like there's so many people that are starving for information about how to take care of themselves, and they just want to live better. They just want to be healthy, and anything we can do to help that, I'm happy to do it. Yeah.
And if you hear Jerry and go, man, I wish my doctor was like him, set to move to Florida and figure out where he's at. That's it. It'll all work out. I'm sure that's fine. Just head to Florida and you'll find him. Anyway, hey, there you have it. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for listening. If you're looking for more information, go to themedical.show. That's our website. You'll find all 6 of our initial episodes there. They're up on the podcast. They're all over the place. YouTube, of course. We have full video on YouTube of the show, as well as for those YouTube music listeners, they can also subscribe to it as an audio podcast if they like. That'll do it for us. Big thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time right here on The Medical Show.
Frog in pants. If you're looking for something froggy smooth, find more at frogpants.com.